I'm Lee. Hey there, Lee Taylor. How's it going? Matt Gonzalez.
Hey Matt.
Hey, are you
Well, now you went away.
take it away? You said.
And I said, now you went away. Oh, there you go.
Oh,
Yeah, I was just going to mute and listen.
great. Um, with that, we'll let Ken get us going here.
Let's call the meeting to order. San County Board of Review and San Diego County Planning Commission joint work session for the model electric code at 11:05 a.m.
Thanks for being here, everyone, and everyone's online. What we're hoping to achieve here today is have just a good discussion. Well, first a presentation from Shauna Mozingo, our code expert with Noresco here to talk about the low energy and carbon code and some other provisions in the code like electric readiness and all those types of things relative to the state law for energy codes that we've all been talking about for the last, many months. What I would like from you all is to take advantage of this opportunity, whether you're online or here in the room, to our board members, board of review and planning commission members to ask any questions that you have. And this is your chance to really, ask those big ticket item questions that you all have about what is the code, what is the impact going to be, any things you've heard, negative or positive, that you want to share, or just kind of get out of the way. We'd love to have those addressed today. So with that, we'll let Shauna introduce herself, and then go into her presentation. I will leave it up to Shauna to decide when to entertain questions from the board and members and all those things. So with that, we'll let Shauna take it away.
Morning, thanks for having me here. I'm Shauna Mozingo with Noresco, the Codes Program Manager with Noresco. I have been doing code adoption around the state of Colorado for the last 20 years and helping jurisdictions adopt codes. I was a building inspector and a plan reviewer for City of Glenwood, City of Westminster, Colorado Code Consulting, and then had my own business. So I do a lot of research on buildings while they're under construction, where we understand codes, where we're misunderstanding codes, where we need more education, or where we just need to flat change the language of the code because nobody's getting it. And so I love to do the research and then go out, teach the codes. I teach all the codes except electric. Your building will burn down, you rely on me for your electric. And I help adopt code. So I know the questions that most people have around the low energy and carbon code, or just the electric ready, solar ready, EV ready provisions that are coming out, the new energy codes. So I've put together a presentation to talk to you about that today. We can ask questions as we go, but I'm pretty familiar with the questions that come up. So so I'll let you know if you have a question. Hey, I'm getting ready to cover that in a minute. Hold on. But yeah, I wanted to be open and ask good questions. Caveat, I don't work for the state of Colorado. I didn't write this code. I'm here to help you understand what was written. And I do contract to the state to help jurisdictions move forward. But so sometimes there's questions just about who I am. There we go. All right, we're going to talk about this code and the misunderstandings or the understandings as we go. The first thing that I want to just bring out that I think people don't realize, and this is whether it's the flat energy code or the low energy and carbon code, that there is intent written in chapter 1 of the code that says that this code is intended save energies, save carbon emissions and all of that, but it says that the code is intended to provide flexibility in order to do that. So you have to realize at the national level that there are many people involved in writing this, and then even at the state level, there were many different people writing this. It's not just the state writing a code. And so the National Association of Home Builders is very involved in writing this energy code, and so they are very focused on making sure we stay with this flexibility as we move through the code. So just so you know that. Also, oh, sorry. So some of the things that we think about, like each edition of the code in the intent, it also says that we're not, that each new edition of the code has to move us a little bit forward towards our national, state, and local goals. You can't roll back. And so what we have really focused on in these codes is to make sure that we are providing that flexibility as we move forward, right? Do not just crank everything down and say, here you go, you get what you get, don't throw a fit. I know we're going to add as much flexibility in there. We have to have flexibility in the code in order for it to actually work. Because what everybody doesn't get credit at the same window supplier or insulation supplier, or don't buy your wood in the same place. Nobody builds the exact same way or has the same engineer. We have to have flexibility to allow you to choose different things. So there's always been alternate methods and materials in the code that allow you to do that. But there's also in this energy code and low energy and carbon code, different paths of compliance. Some people just want to be told what to do, tell me what to do, that's what I'll do. And so there's a prescriptive path, but there's also paths that let you trade things around. And so those are in the code still, nothing has changed with that. There's additional efficiency options that came in to the code that says, hey, we need to crank down the code, but instead of us telling you how to do that, we're going to give you the options of how you want to do that. And so we're going to look at that a little bit today. And then, yes, there are fuel options. There are no fuel mandates in this code. So just want to get that out there. But we'll cover that in detail too. So the initial thought behind the creation of these codes was we need to definitely make more efficient buildings. But let's give the designers and the owners the choice of how they get there ultimately. So I just want to keep that in mind as we move forward through this. So like I said, who writes this code? The National Association of Home Builders was very involved. I've been involved at the national level helping write the energy code since the 2003 edition. And the home builders have been involved over the years, but in the last couple cycles have been very, very involved. And I could, if I were teaching you a class on just the energy code, I could go through and show you the home builders got this in, the home builders got this in, the home builders, and so they're very active and they're very staying on top of that flexibility and cost, right? Everything that makes it into the code has to be presented with how much it's going to add to the cost of construction. So that's also in there. But there's a lot of people. There are code officials, not as many as probably should be at the energy code hearings, but there are code officials, the gas folks, the electric folks, the insulation, the glass, all kinds of people there, designers. AIA has representatives there, National Multifamily Housing Council is there, BOMA, the Building Owners and Managers Association, all kinds of energy advocates, TOE, PNL. So that's at the national level. At the state level, the Energy Code Board was made of a diverse group of contractors and code officials and designers and just people that have to use this code. So that keeps that diversity, keeps everybody having to look at it from all the different angles. We also had the public. Every one of these codes goes out to the public to review and have a say so and comment on. And so the public has been very involved in this, especially when we get to talking about that electric ready, solar ready code that is a requirement at the state level right now. It's been a requirement since 2023. And so people have been using it. And so when the state wrote the model low energy and carbon code, they were bringing that electric ready, solar ready stuff over. But before they did that, they stopped and asked the public, whoever's been using this code, what's working, what isn't working, what do we need to change? And they took all of that advice in and updated the version that's in the low energy and carbon code. So the electric ready, solar ready, EV ready requirements that are in the low energy and carbon code are an updated version based off of comments from everybody that has been using them so far. So that's really great. So there's a lot of people involved. It's, it was this, for the model low energy and carbon code, it was the legislation drove it, right? The legislation ordered the state to create a board and write a code, right? The state didn't just come out and say, this is what we're doing. It was legislatively driven. All right, a couple of things that I like to just point out is don't confuse the codes. There is a 2024 IECC, that's the energy code, that's the most recent version. A new one will come out in 2027, so in January we'll probably have a new energy code. But right now, the latest edition is the 2024. That is an independent code, right, from all of this. You have the 2024 IECC. You also have right now the state's version of the model electric ready, solar ready code. That has been a requirement since 2023, that if you adopt new codes, you have to be on that electric ready code. That's its own independent little code. Then you have the model low energy and carbon code. If you adopt the model low energy and carbon code, you do not have the requirement to adopt the IECC and the electric ready code because those are in the model low energy code. So it's one book. It's one, ICC has published that book. It's one book that includes everything. And so keep that in mind. The 2024 IECC, that model low energy and carbon code is based on that 2024 IECC. So it just took the code book and put the amendments in it. And so you have that published book. And so I have here, what happens if we just removed the LECC, the low energy and carbon code, out of the equation? What would we be left with? We would have our option of the 2024 IECC and the model electric ready code separately. But you would also end up with, I put this because I want you to understand that it's not necessarily the low energy and carbon code that is driving all of the questions that you have. The majority of the questions that I receive are on the 2024 IECC and the electric ready code. Right? It's not the low energy and carbon code driving those questions. So even if you took the low energy and carbon code out and never adopted it, you would still have the same questions. The majority of your questions would still be the same because they are items that are in the energy code and the electric ready code. So I just want to kind of keep that. You would still have home option sizes or home size options in the IECC, even if you didn't put the low energy and carbon. You still have a point system that you would have to do. You would still have that electric ready, solar ready things that you would do. You would have, for commercial buildings, a way more expensive and harder code to comply with, going with the 2024 IECC as written, and instead of the low energy and carbon code. The state energy code board completely revamped that, the requirements for commercial buildings. And I was looking yesterday, I've helped 27 jurisdictions adopt new codes over the last 9 months. That's 3 jurisdictions a month. And not one time have I ever, or will I ever, recommend the 2024 IECC for commercial buildings as it's written. It's complex, it's hard, it's crazy. I just won't, right? And so the option that I recommend is the low energy and carbon code for commercial buildings, because the state went in there and fixed all of the complexity, removed requirements. It's easier and cheaper to build to the low energy and carbon code for commercial buildings. So if you take that low energy and carbon code away, you're gonna have a harder time for commercial. I'm just gonna throw that out there. You will have, if for residential buildings, you will have a penalty for gas versus electric in the energy code as written. The state in the model low energy and carbon code removed that penalty. I know that that's super confusing, so we're gonna talk about that in detail. But the state removed that penalty. But if you, and then also in the 2024 IDCC as written, it will say that, you know, that if you use gas, and if you go performance path and you use gas, you have to be more efficient than if you used all electric. And it only does that in one path, so all of the other paths don't have to do that, so why do we have one path of compliance that is more strict than all the other paths? The state fixed that in the energy carbon code as well, right? So there are a lot of things that the Energy Code Board really did focus on. Maintain the flexibility that's in the IECC that the home builders worked so hard to get in there, but also fix some of the things, the complexity and some of the penalties in there. So I just want to make sure that we're understanding that. I know I have been submitted with a lot of your specific questions. And they really are not about the low energy and carbon code as much as they are this mandatory electric ready, solar ready code that everybody has to do no matter what. So I wanted I'm always telling people, you know, redirect your focus on the positive. But here I'm going to tell you, let's look at our focus. The new that you can focus on new codes are penalizing the use of gas in our building. But I'm going to challenge you to redirect that focus to no, they're not penalizing the use of gas. They're actually a building with gas in it just meets the code. What they're doing is incentivizing the use of electric. You can do less than the base minimum code if you do certain things, right? You can get better credits for this heat pump, or you can get better credits here and there. So you can do less, but you do not have to do more because you're using gas. So I just want to make sure that we know that in the low energy and carbon code, that's not true if you did look with the base energy code. So we have to change our focus on that. And then another thing that I would challenge you as we go through this today is think about don't start at ground zero. We think about the code and we say, oh, now we have to do electric ready. We have to make our whole building electric ready. That's going to be bigger panels and bigger transformers and all of this stuff that's going to happen. Are you looking at that electric ready code as if you were starting at ground zero, building a house, and now you had to make the whole thing all electric ready, all electric, basically electric ready? Or are you looking at the house you were already going to build that has electric everywhere, outlet every 6 feet, and GFCIs, and and even a gas dryer requires an electric outlet, right? Like, are you looking at this code adds on top of what you were already doing? And I think that that's what a lot of people forget. Like, we were already electrifying our house, and we already have outlets everywhere, and even our gas appliances require an electric outlet because there are electric igniting, right? And so it's just maybe you were going to do a different electric appliance, or there's some EV stuff that you weren't going to do. Let's talk about that adding to your load, right? And so when I get all these questions about, hey, this is going to drive all new electric, we're going to have 1500 amp panels, and we're going to have these big, huge transformers. There could be some of that, right? There could be some of that. There could be some of that without this code, right? One thing that I learned as I work in a lot of mountain communities is the bigger houses have way more amenities on them, and so they already drive those higher loads. What will this do to them, right? Or we already use gas for radiant, and we use gas for snow melt. I mean, and now we have to convert all of that to electric. That could be, but does it drive more cost? Or does it equal out the cost? We're gonna talk about some of that. But the main thing that I want you to think about is just starting, you know. Starting with what you're already doing and count what is this on top of that instead of starting from ground zero, like here's this whole new code, the whole code is gonna cost so much. You were already doing 3/4 of it. Right, and so this challenge you to start there as being work pupils today. All right, so what are our options for code adoption? We have, we can adopt a code before June 30th. We don't have to adopt the model low energy and carbon code if we hurry and get a new code adopted before June 30th. That's 2 weeks away. I don't know if it can be done, but what the state legislation will look at in a minute and say anything after June 30th, you have to adopt the model low energy and carbon. Right?
What code do we currently have?
2018 code cycle.
Right, so, you can adopt the model low energy and carbon code as your new energy code. You can just not move forward at all, but when you do that, you hold all your other codes hostage. You know, like we can't move forward on the building code or a plumbing code or anything, a mechanical, we can't move forward on a fire code.
Or even to amend
Or
our
even.
current, like, so if we have something we want to fix in our 2018 code, we can't even do that.
Yep. That's
That
right,
includes
and
land use code or just building?
Building code resolution.
codes that affect buildings, because they have had some jurisdictions try to get really creative and put it all in their land use code and not call it the building code, and the state came back and said no, because the wording says it's for building, or for codes affecting buildings, not building code, right, and so,
Excuse me, Sean, our land use code and building codes live in separate documents. So we have a building code resolution that's totally independent of the land use code, so we would use that. So.
Funny, somebody's laptop has their speakers on.
all right, so it's just a couple things to think about, is we can stay where we're at, maybe. But there's also some other things in there, you know, that we hurried and got some wording in some one-off legislation that was going through, not this last cycle, but the cycle before, that said, hey, because the state is mandating a wildfire code, that can't kick in the requirement for everybody to hurry up and adopt a new energy code, right? Like, no, that can't happen. And so that went through. The mandatory requirement to adopt a wildfire code, though state wildfire code can't make you adopt this. Now, if you choose not to adopt the state's wildfire code and you adopt your own wildfire code or the International Wildland and Urban Interface Code, and you make that change after June 30th, you will have to do the model low energy and carbon code, because that legislation only allowed you an out if you adopted the state's wildfire code. If the state electric board changes their electric code, that will kick in a requirement. That will be a code that affects buildings, and it will kick in a requirement for you to change your code. The electric board generally will adopt their new electric code in August. So in August, if you had made any changes to your code before July 1st and the electric board changed in August, you would have to change to the low energy and carbon code. If there is some wording in there that says that if the only reason you're changing your code is because of the state's electric board, you have till 2030 to adopt the low energy and carbon code. But that's generally not the case that happens.
So we don't have an electrical code adopted. We leave it to the states, and
Right.
so is that still in effect here? So like we don't enforce any electrical code or the NEC. No.
So no, so it won't kick in the requirement for you.
Yes.
Even if the
But-
state changes something in August.
It won't kick in the
Doesn't kick in.
requirements. But what about your fire departments, right? So you have fire districts, right? And so.
One of our board members is Norwood Fire Protection.
That-
One of our board members is the Norwood Fire Protection Chief.
what happens is the fire districts are gonna adopt a wildfire code, or the fire district are gonna adopt a fire code. If they don't do it at the same time that you adopt your codes and they do it at a different time, it could kick in a requirement for you to adopt a low energy carbon code anyway. Right, because it's a code that affects your buildings. The only way that it won't kick in is if they have their own process and they don't go through your same county commissioners to adopt code.
And they don't.
And so if they have their own process that has nothing to do with you, then it won't kick in, that requirement.
Got it.
And so that's some nice, things for you to know. But just know that what I really want you to understand is that you have a building code and you have a plumbing code and a mechanical code and an accessibility code. All these codes are changing, even the accessibility requirements are changing. And, you don't get to have any of those changes without also changing your energy code, right? And so there's a lot of new great things on energy storage and battery storage and, I'm just trying to think of all the things that have changed in the code, that accessibility provisions are getting revamped. There's all kinds of new changes in the IRC that make the cost of construction even cheap, way less in the 24 IECC because of those home builders getting involved. And so you don't get to experience any of those things just because you're not willing to adopt an energy code. So keep that in mind. As we go through this.
So Matt, what does that mean for us? Like, what is our plan? Are we adopting this thing?
So our plan is to adopt later on this year the 2024 international codes with the LLC, replacing the energy code part of the international code.
So the 2024 IECC is in the LECC, so we're adopting the LECC. All
Yep, so I think,
All
yeah,
the Colorado Model Low Energy Code based on the 2024 IECC. So it's just the 2024 IECC with the energy code, the Colorado requirements laid in it.
mhm.
So you just,
That's what we're gonna
it's
adopt.
just one book.
So that's one part of it. So like Shauna was saying, we'll adopt all of the 2024 international codes. So residential code, commercial, building, mechanical, all that stuff. We will use this LECC as the energy code supplement to that. That will be, if everyone's on board with that, you all and the county commissioners want to continue that. We will adopt it this fall by the county commissioner's resolution and then enforce it a year after that. So we give people time to adjust to the new design requirements.
All right. So we're gonna dive into a few of the, what is this low energy and carbon code here in a minute. I would just say we're gonna focus a lot on residential because, well, county, a lot of times counties don't have a lot of commercial buildings.
Mhm.
And I will say that, like I said, the commercial buildings, the low energy and carbon code is just, there's just absolutely no question on what you should do. Yeah, the state has the ability to amend codes in a way that I cannot, right? I write code amendments for jurisdictions based on what they can do and what they can't do, what are their goals, all of that. But I can only go so far because there's state laws that say I cannot amend a code to be less restrictive. And, I have parameters. The state, when they're writing a new code, they can take things out that I can't. For example, the 2024 IECC for commercial requires all new commercial buildings to have on-site renewable energy. And the state was like, we don't agree with that. We're gonna handle that at the grid. We're not gonna handle that on every individual building. And so they could amend that out, right? This 21 and 24 energy code for commercial buildings requires controlled outlets. And the state was like, no, they went through and took some of the things that were a little bit onerous without as much payback on them and took those things out. I can't do that because I'm not allowed to write a code that's less restrictive, and the state could. So they went through there, that 2024 IECC for commercial buildings and the additional efficiency package points option. So complicated and so hard. And the state went through and wiped it out and put in a whole new thing that's much easier to use. So commercial buildings, I think that there's just no other option than that. And what we want to kind of talk about is what should we do for residential? That seems to be a focus in a county, usually more on residential than commercial. So we'll talk a little bit about both, but we're gonna focus on that. So just, the example of the House bills that went through, there was a House bill that said, hey, you have to, if you update. The old one was if you updated code, it has to be either the 15, 18, or 21. That was replaced by the new House bill in 2022 that said, if you update a code, you have to be, and you do it, we gave different times, right? But if you update a code, you have to go to the new minimum of the 2021 IECC plus the state's electric ready, solar ready, EV ready code. Or you can go to the model low energy code. So, or model low energy and carbon code. They gave you some deadlines. If you change codes between July of 2023 and July of 2026, you can go to the 2021 IECC and the model electric ready, solar ready. Those were your minimums that you had to do. That ends in a couple weeks, right? And so now anytime you change the code after July 2026, you have to adopt the model low energy and carbon code, which includes the electric ready, solar ready in it. So there was also another House bill out there that people, I would find probably 1/10 of the jurisdictions that I visit realize that this is true or that this is in place. House Bill 1233, which went in. It was in 23, went into effect March 1st, 2024, that said all multifamily buildings, all new multifamily buildings will get some form of EV charging. And so that if they pull, and it's tied to electric, so you probably might not be aware of it at the building department since you guys don't do your own electric, but the state electric knows, and so they would be enforcing electric vehicle charging on all multifamily buildings. The idea behind that, it was an equity decision, right? So we put in these requirements for electric ready, solar ready, EV ready, but they only kick in if a jurisdiction changes codes. What if a jurisdiction doesn't change codes? Then that requirement doesn't ever kick in. And so we said for multifamily, it's really important because I'm gonna go rent an apartment. I'm gonna rent it based on what I can afford this month, not what amenities they have available to me. And so I'm gonna look at it based on that kind of thing. And so whatever I can afford is what I get. And they were wanting people that are renting to have the same opportunities for EV charging and other things that somebody that owns a home has. And so they said they might want an electric vehicle, but they can't have one because there's no way to charge it. And so requirements came in that all new multifamily have some level of EV charging.
Is that, excuse me, like an R2 occupancy group or so not duplexes and townhomes, correct?
It is R2.
Okay,
So.
so like apartments in like the conventional sense. So like Shandoka is like an R2 apartment. Yeah. Townhomes and duplexes are categorically not apartments.
Sunnyside.
1 and 2 family.
Yeah.
Is it ownership that determines that?
No, it's the building code determines it based on a couple of things, but
Mostly house being built.
yeah, so single family, 2-family, and townhomes as defined are not apartments. So an apartment is like may not have direct access to like a courtyard or grade, like on the second or third story, right? That's like when you see those are so in four units or more kind of built like that is usually what defines an apartment, like an R2 occupancy group. So
So it just sends you, they have to have EV charging and it sends you to the low energy and carbon code or the electric ready code to. So that you have the same amount and you put in the kind and the amount that code has, but you have to do those, whether you adopt a new code or not. And so, but say for you, that's driven by the state electrical, since they do your electrical, because it's tied to the electrical permit and not a building permit. So they will kick it in. The hard part, I think, the thing that I've seen happen most is the jurisdictions don't know it if they're using the state. So the state's enforcing it, and so the developers are coming back saying, you didn't tell me anything about this.
Right.
All right, because you just don't have that, but. All right, so this is our next minimum code, this Colorado Model Low Energy and Carbon Code. It is again based on the 2024 IECC. They took that book, printed as it is, written by all the same people that it was written for, just added the state language into it and amended some of the things to make it more state specific. The difference between IECC that's written, it's an international code written for everywhere. We were able to take the Colorado part and make it more about Colorado. So you have an energy code that's for Colorado instead of the international. So it's already been published, see, and it goes into effect July 1.
And you can access it online too in the same ICC code website. You can find on there too. I linked it in the documents to you guys.
You can do they have a free version that you can look at, and they have the paid version if you do that. I never used the paid version. All right, so what kind of things went into this low energy and carbon code? Of course, the state has goals on, getting to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and so the goal you see put into this low energy and carbon code. Affordability, I know a lot of people say nothing's going to be affordable anymore, but affordability totally went into this, so we're going to talk about that. Consistency and energy codes around the state, trying to get more consistency. So we have one energy code that's effective July 1st, and so more and more people will be on it, getting more consistency. We'll have a lot more resources and a lot more availability of contractors that know how to do it and designers that know how to do it, because it will be the one consistent code that people are using. We can create requirements that work for jurisdictions across the state and modify the requirements to meet our local needs instead of that international. What is it? It's flexible, right? We have fuel options, we have pathway options, we have all kinds of options in the code. It has been revamped to make it not as complex. It really has. And it does encourage electrification, but only where appropriate. What this code is not, it does not mandate electrification. It does not penalize you for using gas. It doesn't make you do more for doing gas. It allows you to do less, right? I just want to stress that if you build a house and you want to bring a gas to that house, that has to meet code. If you don't bring gas to the house and you just do electric, you can do less than code, right? So you're not doing more for gas. And so I just want to make sure that we know that. It does not require renewables for everyone, except maybe there might be if there's a section in the code that we'll look at in a minute that, like, if you build over 7,500 square feet of a conditioned floor area, where you would have to go net zero, and in order to get net zero, you would have to have some renewables. But it doesn't apply across the board. All right, so fuel debiasing, people don't understand what fuel debiasing is, and so really it's just looking at, we haven't treated gas and electric the same. Gas is, oftentimes cheaper to use from the utility. Gas is cheaper than electric, and so A lot of people bring gas in, the infrastructure for gas, just was reading a report, just yesterday. That showed that it actually costs more to bring the infrastructure for gas, all of that plumbing and everything in than electric. But the code has always looked at gas versus electric in that gas is cheaper to use, and so the code, when you're comparing, especially when you do a performance approach, it's been based on cost of your utility. You have to show no matter what you do, that the cost your annual energy cost will be less than if you built the house strictly to the letter of the code. Well, then that favors gas because gas is cheaper, right? And so what they said was, let's not base it on cost anymore and actually base it on the energy used. And that equals it out a little more. And of course, there are electric heat pumps and, things like that, that are more efficient. And so now when you look at it, yes, electric. It feels like a bias because you're like, oh, you want to use more electric. But it really is maybe cheaper to install. Utility depends on whether it's cheaper to install and what the cost of electricity is at every location. It's generally higher than gas, however, it is much easier, much more efficient, so you're not using as much. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it evens out. And so that was the idea behind this, was to quit basing things on how much your electric bill costs and base it on how much energy is actually being used in the building. So it looks at it that way. Yes, you get extra credits for using, heat pumps, because they are more efficient. They run more efficiently than a lot of those furnaces or other things. So that is in there. And if you're gonna look at site energy versus energy costs, that's what I was talking about, is that we're gonna look at how much energy is being used on the site instead of how much that energy actually costs you. And focus on trying to get the energy use down. We can't often control the cost because that's up to the utility on what they're charging, but we can control how much energy is being used. So that's what this code is trying to do. It encourages electrification where it's appropriate. It's not requiring electrification. It's requiring you to be electric ready, but it's not requiring you to go all electric. There are, like I said, credits for using electric heat pumps and water and heat pump water heaters and things like that. And it makes it easier than the code. The code right now, as written, because it's based on cost, it makes it easier or at least cheaper to go gas. And so this code is staking that out and saying, if you want to go electric, because there are a lot of people who really like the clean electric heat. And so they want to go electric, and often they haven't been able to because of the cost. And so this is taking that out and saying we can actually, it's actually a little bit easier to go all electric if you want to than it is in the base minimum 24 IECC. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Question.
Sure.
So,
Can you get a mic, Frank, and speak it? Thank you.
yeah, my question is related to if you want to heat, well, let me just clarify that. If you want to have an accessory that's gas fired, say a fire pit on a deck, does that change the path that you're utilizing for performance? As opposed to if everything else is all, if you have heat pumps, but maybe you still have a gas fireplace in the house or on the deck, does that dictate which calculations you have to use for meeting the requirements?
So, if you're in the base 2024 code, just the energy code without the low energy and carbon code, you probably would say, oh, I want to keep some gas, so I'm not gonna go performance, because performance, there's a penalty, I have to be better than code. if I use a gas appliance. In the low energy and carbon code, it doesn't have that, so you can use whatever fuel you want. It's just gonna say. For all the electric ones, all the electric, heating, water, especially heating and water, cooling and water heating. For all of those, we're gonna give you a little extra credit for putting those in. It's not gonna mandate that you choose any path to find. The only time, I guess I should, one caveat. The only time that the code forces you down a very specific path of compliance is on homes over 7,500 square feet. Right, they have to go energy rating index and get a score, certain score, without solar and then net zero with renewable. And so that is the only time you're forced to go a certain path.
Which is-
Everything else is- Whatever you're still doing it exactly the way you want to, or the way that you have been. The main difference is, house sizes. You're thinking more about your house sizes. And you're thinking like the more electric you do, the less the more credit you get. Pretty much what it is.
So the ERI path is, we use the word HERS, right? And so the LECC has that trigger for a required ERI or maybe a HERS score at 7,500 square feet, where historically around here it's been 3,600 square feet. You're forced down that compliance pathway. Does that make sense?
If you build less than 7,500 square feet, you can use any path you want. And if you build more than 7,500 square feet of conditioned floor area, then you have to go ERN. Before that, you have all the options. You can run gas. What I find builders tell me, especially in jurisdictions where they're already using it, and they've been on the electric ready code requirements for a while. Most builders will tell me that, yeah, we did the electric ready for a while. I mean, we had to do the electric ready and we used gas for a while. But then we discovered that it was so much cheaper and easier to have one fuel source and to not bring gas. Because if you're gonna get a lot of extra credit, you can still use a gas cook stove. You can still use a gas fireplace. You can still have a gas furnace. Right? You're gonna find if you do some of those electric, it's gonna be easier to comply, right? And so, or you're gonna get more credit, you're gonna comply quicker. And so at some point, builders are saying, well, I have to go electric ready no matter what. So the whole house has to go as if it was gonna be all electric, but I can still bring gas in and use a gas appliance, but I have to get it electric ready. Once you do that, they say, why am I bringing gas too? Right? But you still have a choice. So what this code is looking
Hey, Matt,
at-
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Emery. This is Emery Smith, one of our board of review members.
I just want to be clear. So the screen that we're looking at here, effectively, if it's a home over 5,000 square feet, it's now being required to be 7 to 10 and then more efficient. And then extra large 7,500 above has to be a net zero. Is that what I'm boiling down from this one slide?
Yeah, right, but a lot of that is already in the code, but the code is looking at the bigger footprint you have, the more you're gonna have to do, so that we are dealing with, we have that goal of dealing with the carbon emissions. So, the code just says if you're less than 5,000 square feet, you're basically doing the minimum code as written. If you're going to be between 5,000 and 7,500, you're gonna do a little bit extra to deal with that because you have a bigger carbon footprint. Right, you're gonna do, but it gives you the choices of what you want to do. You just have to do something more. And then if you're over 7,500, yes, you're going to go. Basically, like I said, I think for this climate zone, I'm gonna say it requires a HERS score of 42 without renewables and a 0 with renewables. Be sure.
And
But that's
just
based
for
on
perspective, what would be
unlimited-
for the same size home, let's just use 7,500. For the same size home, what would be the effective HERS rating under just the 2024 IECC base code? I'm just trying to figure out what that delta is in terms that I understand, which is HERS points.
So
Oh, I see what you're saying.
you're asking what's the difference between the IECC requirement for a home that size versus the LECC requirement as relative to the HERS score?
Yeah, so a 7,500 square foot home under the small tier lines with 2024 IECC base code. What is that approximately in the HERS? And then we just heard that we're looking at a 42 or 43, I can't remember, under this additional code. Curious what that delta number is.
Yeah.
I'll look it up and I can drop it in the chat. Emery, does that work for you or let you know?
Sure.
So it looks at houses less than 5,000 and houses over 5,000, and it has a different score based on that. And I don't have them memorized. Kim?
So for those who don't know me, Kim Wheels with Eco Action Partners. I also have a business in the area providing HERS ratings and other energy consulting to the region. I was on the State Energy Code Board, as well as then Eco Action Partners has a grant to help with code implementation and adoption across the region. Just to provide that background for why I'm speaking. I thought this might be a good time to bring into the conversation 2 amendments for regional amendment package that apply to this conversation. One of which is that we have an amendment to propose and include, and most of the jurisdictions in the region are including it, to clarify that what the county is looking for is a HERS score. So there is a difference technically between a HERS score and an ERI score. And just for clarification, simplicity, all the reasons, and because that's what we're used to using here, HERS score is what the county is looking for. And so that makes a little bit of a difference with the answer here to specific score of what to respond to. The other amendment that is being proposed is to utilize the same size category that the county already has. So that instead of San Miguel County using the state's size category for large home is starting at 5,000, this county would start at 3,600 or 3,500, which is what another jurisdiction in the region had. So somewhere in that range would be the starting point for the large home requirements. And those amendments will go in front of the commissioners with Matt's recommendation. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation.
And that brings up a good point, thanks, Kim, because there are some amendments that we have been proposing, you know, like you can propose amendments to this low energy and carbon code. It's a model code, right? And so it is allowed to have models or amendments. You can't make the whole code less restrictive, but you can do amendments, like some other amendments. You know, the state is pretty open to it. I don't remember if it was your Ray or Ridgeway, who we did it. But, you know, they said, well, we want to make an amendment for some of our homes that are off the grid. What can we do for that? And so we work with the state for that. Or we want to not do everything solar ready based on roof. What if we want to have ground mounted solar? So we made an amendment on that. So there's opportunity to amend, but there was a regional code board to come up with some consistent amendments for this area, and so that is what Kim was talking about on that. So I would think, and that goes back to my whole in the beginning, please, you know, start from where you're at, because you guys are already more efficient than the base code, right? And so a lot of this sounds like it's more, but you're already more. And so it's not as big of a jump as you think that it is. And so that's why hey, let's start from where we're at and not from, oh, this big book. Okay, because you guys are already better than this book in a lot of places, so. Yeah, if I could get out of here, I could go into the IECC and find those scores.
It's, I put it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Make sure you got it.
How do pre-manufactured homes, how are they going to be scored here?
Yeah.
Right, because that's a whole different animal about the state.
It is
And
a
then
whole different.
passed down to us.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, the state DOLA, that does the housing, you know, and they are the ones that do the plan reviews and then all inspections and everything of manufactured housing. You can, or the local jurisdiction can only enforce the code based on anything extra they do, not the house, like the stairs that they might attach to it, or if they put it on a foundation, that foundation has to meet code. Anything that they attach it to or attach to it or the site might have to comply, but the house is out of your hands.
Except for the sprinkler system.
Except for. And so, this code will not apply to that yet. The state, when I was talking to DOLA just a couple weeks ago, they said that the state has not yet adopted these requirements, right? Because they haven't moved codes, but they are getting ready to move codes, and so it will kick in another year. But right now, those requirements are not in there. They'll look at the local, wind and snow load and all of those kind of things, but they're actually redoing all of that too, so that they don't have to have something different for every jurisdiction. They've revamped their whole modular housing program to have one code that has kind of averages for the states. And so we can't require anything on manufacturing. Right, that's the state, what energy code, what everything is, whatever the state is on. So right now, they're not on this, they said within a year. Good question. All right, let's look at, here's something that's not in the code that you're gonna see in the low energy and carbon code, demand response capability requirements for water heating. For residential, it's just for water heating. It's just saying, if you have, your water heating needs to have demand response capability requirements. That's not saying that you have to be a part of any demand response program. It's just that it has to be capable of doing that in case somebody wants to get involved in a utility program that can, look at those peak loads and take the use down. For commercial, there is some requirements for demand response capabilities for space heating, water heating, and lighting. Again, that's just making sure you have the right controls. They have to be capable of responding to the demand, but you do not have to actually do it. But that is something that's in this code that went into the 2024 IECC originally, but got pulled at the last second, right before it got published. But it is in the low energy code. All right, some other things, mandatory prescriptive renewable energy requirements for commercial buildings, yanked up, right? That there is a requirement in 2024, the state said, no, we're not gonna do that. The PRI requirements, for that use renewable, were removed. And so now you reach your target. If you want to use renewables, great, you can get some extra points for that, and here you go, but there's no, you don't have to do this or that. And so those are some nice fixes in the low energy and carbon code. They've updated, like I said, we took all of the, I say we, I wasn't on that board, but that was a great board, and they did a lot of work because they really went into that energy code and found all the stuff and tried to make it better. So kudos to them, but they listened to all the people who have been having to use the state's minimum electric ready, solar ready, EV ready code. And they looked at that and they said, what's working, what's not working. And they rewrote that. And so they updated some of those items based on that. You have new requirements for your infrastructure and sizing. There's options in there now for, where people freak out about sizing of panels. And how much extra electric load this is all going to be, and what are we supposed to do? And they've gone in there and added some options for you can size. Well, first, the NEC has some amendments that or some exceptions that people are not utilizing, but they brought in some nice formulas of sizing to peak demand. There's different ways of sizing so that you're not like sizing as if every single thing in the house was turned on at the same time, and some different things that are allowed in the NEC that people are just not utilizing. And so they brought in some of those things. They revised those solar ready zones so that maybe it's not all on one roof. You could have zones on different roofs. So as long as the total area adds up. I have some jurisdictions that are, or some builders who are putting, oh, it doesn't have to all be on top of my house, I can put. Maybe it's on my garage or on a commercial building, maybe it's on a parking structure or something, right? Like, so there's some flexibility in breaking those and having subzones in there. There's some new flexibility for electric vehicle charging that allows you, if you put in a faster charger, you could get out of some of these other requirements. You don't have to put in as many and stuff. And so there's some things that really did get brought up. They did put some more specific requirements in there for the accessibility of those EV charging spaces for commercial buildings. To make sure that we weren't conflicting with any of the other codes, so. Really updated those requirements in the low energy carbon. What are some of the we could talk about benefits, we have talked about some balanced cost and versus cost effectiveness. Cheaper compliance for electric if you choose to go electric, not a requirement that you go electric, but it's definitely making it cheaper to do so. Simplify some of those super complex code sections that should have never made it into the code. Removes the requirement for some overburden, some things like those controlled outlets and solar on every new commercial building. And then localize some of the stuff for just Colorado. When you open this book, you're only gonna find stuff for Colorado. Right, climate zone 4, 5, 6, and 7, that's all you're gonna find in there. So those are some of the benefits. Let's talk cost, right? That's what you all want to talk about. First, this is low energy and carbon code stuff that the state gave me for costs. But let me talk to you about just the base energy code because that's what this is built on. The National Association of Home Builders have been so involved in this code and getting so much flexibility in there that they publish a report, which I'm happy to send anybody who sends me a request for one. They publish a report every code cycle on the code. Their innovation lab looks at everything that changed in the code and puts a dollar amount by it for each climate zone based on location. And so they can tell you, okay, based on if you're building a 2,500 square foot house in Colorado that's on a basement versus a slab on grade, here's how much the cost of construction is going to change for energy codes or just the whole residential code. And for the majority of the state, that cost actually to go from the 2018 and the 2021 to the 24 went down. Everything is in red, right? The cost of construction went down for most of the state because they got so many changes in there, so much flexibility. Climate zone 6 and climate zone 7 are the only climates that's on increase. And that is, there's some, well, I'll show you here.
What are we?
What size of homes is that based on?
3, 6, and 7?
We're six.
Yes.
Even Norwood?
This is a 2,500. So you will see an increase in cost, and that's mainly because the energy code, not the low energy and carbon code, but the energy code, the base energy code, changed your blower door, your air leakage test to be 2.5 ACH 50 instead of 3 ACH 50. So you have a tighter building. How they associated the cost with that, I don't know. I guess just more attention to detail. And also it used to be only climate zone 7 that required ERVs or an HRV, and now that is also a requirement for climate zone 6. So that went in there. Actually, the insulation and window requirements rolled back. So that's not really something that affects you. You guys do have, I think, localized higher insulation requirements than the code does, don't you? You don't have a requirement for continuous insulation or something?
No.
It's
in the amendment package.
Oh, it's in the amendment.
Well, and I gotta say, like, we're not sure if we're gonna move forward with that amendment package that the code cohort that was presented in those discussions as well. So, we're working on, going through some of those local amendments to the LECC, but we haven't decided on anything yet.
So I just wanna, whenever we're talking about cost of going electric, because that seems to be the cost, right? That's where everybody's freaked out about is this electric ready and the all electric, or, there's no requirement for all electric. But I have been working on an all electric code for the city of Aspen for years. Their city council wanted us to do it when we went to 2021 and we said, please give us some time to figure that out. We don't want to write a code and then say, figure out how to make it work afterwards. We want to know that it's going to work before we write it. So we've been writing it for a long time, and in that process, we've had a lot of studies done by some really great people. And some of the things that, that we find in there are that you have to have an amazing building thermal envelope if you want to have beneficial electrification, right? The better envelope that you have, the better insulation and air sealing and windows and all of that, the better thermal envelope that I have, that is gonna bring down the load, right, for heating and cooling. And so now when I do go all electric, I'm not taking as huge of a load with me, right? I don't have to have this big huge transformer. I don't have to have this big thing because I have a building where the heat will stay the same temperature for a very long time, right? Or the cooling will stay the same temperature for a very long time. I don't have as big of a load. I don't need as big of equipment. And so I would just, when I recommend to people, once we start going down this all electric or even electric ready, and we're worried about loads, then your first main focus needs to be on that thermal envelope, right? So I would never recommend going with a lesser requirement for your thermal envelope, right? You have pathways in the code that let you trade. But just keep in mind that when you start trading off your thermal envelope, you're increasing your load for your mechanical equipment. And so those are just things to keep in mind. I have seen this, I have seen the cohort amendments, and so I don't know if you go with them or not, that's up to you, but I will say that anytime that you can have an amendment that makes the envelope be better, that's gonna make the rest of this work. Right? Because everybody's worried about the size of the transformer, the size of the panel, and the cost of the electricity. You won't need as much of that if you are putting all of that in a good building. So that's just something to think about as you move forward. All right, so how does it help to maintain or reduce costs? Homes less than 5,000 are largely required meeting the base code unless you have, you have your 3,600 square foot amendment. Basically would meet the main code, and anything more than that have to do a little bit more. There's no requirement for on-site renewable energy. It's an option, and if you do it, you might get some points for it. You use the points for it, or the credit for it.
But
Easier to
even these smaller houses have to be solar ready. That is the base standard.
solar
yes.
ready, yes, there's some exceptions, and we're gonna go into all of that.
Okay.
Because that's the part, like I'm just skimming over this low energy and carbon code, but I'm gonna dive into electric ready, solar ready EV, because that seems to be where everybody's question is. All right. So there's a lot more options. The state in the low energy and carbon code revamped that whole additional efficiency option table and put some good things in there, added more options. So that's another benefit. All right. Speaking of that electric ready code, let's look at this. So what does it say? If I have combustion equipment, I also need a dedicated, appropriately phased branch circuit size to accommodate future electric equipment. right? So I can put in my gas appliance, but I also have to put the electric so that somebody could plug and play. They can take that gas appliance out and plug in some piece of future equipment. If we wait and do it after the fact, it costs a lot more to bring in electric after the fact. It costs a lot more to tear up the drywall and to tear everything up and to have engineers involved in all of that. So do it at the time of construction, right? And you're already putting an outlet in there. The code is already requires you to have a GFCI within certain amount of feet from your equipment. Like, it's not like it's completely new. Yes.
So to clarify, that is, excuse me, either run the wire or provide conduit to be,
That's true.
okay,
Residential, it's not residential, you're putting it in.
run the wire.
Yep, you're having plug and play. Residential is run the conduit, run the wire, put the outlet in. Right? Commercial allows you to run the conduit without running the wire.
Are we gonna talk renovations later? Or would now be the time to ask?
Yes. That's a tricky one, renovations. So this code does apply, the electric ready, solar ready, EV ready requirements say it right up front that it applies to new construction and major renovation. However, it allows the jurisdiction to define what a major renovation is. I have no idea what you guys call a major renovation. That's when this would kick in. Some jurisdictions who hate this code for renovations will make a renovation be really a high, whatever. Some who believe in it will make it really low or whatever. But if you already have what is a major renovation, that is up to the jurisdiction. And I don't know if the amendment package that the cohort is offering has a recommendation on what major renovation is.
There is a definition.
Okay. Okay. So there's another section, another part of the code of the low energy and carbon code outside of electric ready, solar ready, that has a definition for substantial improvement that applies to something else, and some jurisdictions are just gonna use that. But it's based on 50% of if you do work that affects more than 50% of the market value.
So I guess to put it simply, if I renovate my kitchen and I have to put in an electric range, do I also have to go electric ready for my dryer and my car plug-in? No, and I don't have to run conduit through all this house that isn't being touched.
And you don't have to put in an electric range just because you renovate your kitchen,
Really?
right? You can still use whatever gas you want to. You have to meet the code. If you use electric, you might get to do less. But if you use gas, you have to meet the code as it's read, right? And so, you will have to put in an electric outlet. You have to make that portion electric ready if it falls under major renovation, right? And so if you're just doing a kitchen and it doesn't meet major renovation, then it might not, yeah. But if it's a big major renovation, depending on their definition of major renovation, it might require you to put in an outlet there. Still
But if
put
you put in the
gas.
outlet, don't you have to upgrade the panel as well? So now.
Not necessarily, it depends. It really
Depends on the
depends on
house.
what your existing panel size is, right, and what your existing load is and what you're adding to it. A lot of houses, my house is 3 years old, I went out the other day and I have a 400 amp panel installed right from the beginning. I'm gonna be fine for a while on a 400 amp panel, right? I'm not gonna need a new panel for a while, even if I put in an electric stove.
Well, my house is 40 years old, so I'm just very
Yeah.
curious. And a
Right.
lot of the houses around here, I mean, there's the new builds, the big
Sure.
builds here, but the rest of the county, it's a lot of renovation
Yeah.
work.
Some questions.
And so again, it will just be dependent on, that part is going to be dependent on the definition of major renovation that the county.
Matt, do you have any feel for an answer to where you're gonna draw the line there, or are you not ready to speak to that yet?
No,
It's all over the board, I can tell you, around the state, I don't think I've ever seen two the same.
yeah, I'll say this, it's really hard to pin down the definition, or to quantify, like the percent of a remodel, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, people try to say evaluation based, that's a nightmare, and it includes like auditing projects, which we don't really typically do. And then there's square footage thresholds, which people always find a way to fudge or argue, and then they increase the scope of the project after the permit's issued. And so it's just the short answer is not yet. I'll work on it and I'll let you all know.
But it sounds like the short answer is also, I might need an electric range ready, but I'm not gonna have to put in a plug-in for my EV car
Yeah.
also.
Generally, it will apply the
Trigger.
like, right, what you break it, you buy it, kind of break it, right? Yeah, what you touch, you own, right? You pull some drywall off or something, and you got to put the drywall back on. That's it. You're probably fine. If you pull the insulation out, and then you got to put compliant insulation back in.
There's a question, Chad, about our grid and the ability to take on this future load. Have there been
We're like,
We're-
comment. Kim address that. Can you read the question?
Yeah, it says, the first one's from Emery. Do you have do we have enough campus?
No. So Emery's
Potential load, and then John and Baccarat also asked a similar question about the grid support all of this.
So Emery's question is, do you have to have enough ampacity service for the potential future load? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, because the new homeowner or whoever, you might come in and take out all the gas appliances and plug in all electric, and it has to be ready to go. So you have to have the capacity, you have to be sized and have the capacity. Right?
And then the second question is it's more general, and Kim's going to address that because through her work with the Eco Action Partners and participating in the grant cohort, we've had conversations with SMPA and folks like that. So Kim, go ahead. You can tackle that question about what's the capacity of the grid to support this code.
Yeah, I'll preface this with that I don't work for SMPA, so I can't really speak on behalf of their employees, but we have had this conversation multiple times. Staff members are, as part of the code cohort, they've been involved in this. And the answer is that the utilities are preparing for electrification, and that we do not have an issue right now in almost all of our territory with having enough capacity to provide electricity. I think there are I've heard of occasions where there's some neighborhoods where there are a large percentage of homes that have gone all electric. And in those, they are looking at increasing the size of the transformer. And so that's just part of the process of what SMPA has to do in order to accommodate for it. But they have plenty of capacity throughout the grid. They're planning for it. They don't have issues right now with not being able to provide enough electricity. And things just continue to become more robust, I guess more robust is probably the best way to put it. The other thing that kind of to answer some of your questions related to electrification that a lot of people don't think about, and I've heard, because I'm not an electrical engineer either, but I've heard that's not really handled very well by the electric code, is that not everything in your house that's electric is going to be on all at the same time. So there may be requirements to help make sure that things aren't going to short out other things, but I have a 130-year-old house with a 90 amp panel, and I've been told that I could add an EV charger to my house. I could add a dryer. I have a dryer outlet that I don't use. I have solar on my house, and I can handle all of that on a 90 amp panel because I don't use them all at once. They wouldn't get used. And you can put certain things on a timer to help make sure that you're not using it all at once. So there's a lot of smart usage of electricity that can help with all of this. Yeah.
Go ahead, online.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to step on. I got bad connection. I just wanted to say that where that isn't factored in is the NEC calculations. As you add loads for NEC calculations, the service size for that home is increased no matter what. So independent of whether or not something's being on, it ultimately comes down to an engineered calculation. So as you add loads, it adds amps, it adds to service size of a home.
And that is true, but there are some new allowances in the code that allow you to size it. And there are some exceptions in the NEC, and there are some new things in the code that allow you to size for peak demand instead of full demand, right? And so that was brought into the low energy and carbon code specifically, not in the energy code, but it's in the low energy and carbon code. That was one of the things that came out of all of that public input. Was allowing that, so, but yeah, you're right, I mean, as you add load, you have to account for it, but there are ways now in the low energy and carbon code to allow for not having to count for everything on time.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
So in the event that, let's say, one of an area that may not be able to, the grid may not be able to accommodate a particular, load for whatever reason, are there any abilities for waivers to be issued or, documentation to be provided from, say, the utility company to a contractor or something, and then it's applied to us?
No waivers, however, because it comes down to a legislative thing that says thou shalt write a code that requires this, right? And so the state cannot give a waiver on like whether or not you go all electric. However, they can, this doesn't happen very often, but I just had to do this for Telluride. Telluride's on very, very, very old infrastructure.
Here,
Telluride, Colorado.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm not Telluride, Trinidad.
okay, I was like,
Trinidad is on very, very old infrastructure, and they didn't have the ability. The utility was very concerned as they didn't have the ability to do it. And so they wanted to be waived from the requirement. Absolutely can't be waived from the requirement. However, the state did allow me to work with the utility to come up with an implementation plan. And said, okay, we know we have to do this, and we are going to build our infrastructure up. It's gonna take us a while. And we came up with a plan. They increased their fees, in last year, like October, they increased it, and then they have an increase every January in fees. And so that's gonna allow them to do X amount of things each cycle. We have an implementation plan. That implementation plan, the state approved an implementation plan based on the utility and the jurisdiction working together. Didn't let them out of any requirements, but just put it off over time. They didn't have to approve what the implementation plan said. They said that's between the jurisdiction and the utility, but they did approve implementation. So when this code goes into effect for Trinidad in year 1, they'll have electric ready requirements put off.
understood.
Okay, all the other requirements will still kick in. So they won't allow you to get out of it. Right? But because even if
I'm not hearing a consideration of microgrids in the utility network load considerations. And that has some impact on the home capacity as well, in-home solar generation. But those microgrids can greatly, through local energy production and local energy storage, can greatly reduce those network demands to the point where I believe that you could accommodate additional affordable housing at a particular utility network location on that same grid with a microgrid. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that have questions or comments? You can always reach out to us. We will put our building department email in the chat, and we'll let Ms. Shauna continue on with her slides.
combustion equipment, you have to have the receptacle or junction box that meets the requirement of the code, right? So you're going to put that electric receptacle and or junction box will be there, so you're gonna run all the wire, you're gonna do all the things. And then the one thing that's, this one is a little interesting, that it, you know, where you are gonna have combustion equipment, you have it for space or water heating, you have to have a dedicated space for future equipment. So if I have a 40-gallon tank water heater right now, and maybe someday, what's an electric water heater? Is it gonna be the same size? Is it gonna be bigger? Is it gonna be smaller? I have to, when I'm building the house up front, I have to plan for that. So not only do I have to have the outlet, but I have to think about the space that might require. The one thing that I think about is like a heat pump water heater. They're a little bit bigger and and per the NEC require a little bit more clearance, so you might have to build a bigger water heater closet up front, because you have to account for that. The hard part is like thinking about what could the future be, future technology. We're trying to plan for that now, what that might be. That's a little bit harder, but that's the same with the loads too, right? Like it could be require less loads, it could be more loads, we don't know. We just have to base it on what's available today when we're doing this. So that is a little bit harder, part of all of that. But it is a requirement. Electric panel space that saves the space on the panel, right? Reserve physical space for minimum 2-pole circuit breaker for each branch circuit. Make sure that it's labeled for future electric and things like that. So that's electric ready, pretty much. You have some things on there to label it. You know, so that it doesn't get used for something else somewhere down the road. That you have your you have a receptacle within 3 feet of your combustion equipment. It can be 6 feet if it's to the for space heating or water heating. You're always gonna have to have a condensate drain. You're gonna have to plan for that up front, right? Because your electric equipment will require a condensate drain. So those are the kinds of things to think about up front, because it is gonna be much cheaper to do at time of construction than for somebody to come do later. And that's usually what hinders them from ever moving forward. When it comes to solar ready, please know you don't ever have to put solar. You don't have to run any conduit. You don't have to do anything other than on your plans identify the roof space. If you have a single family, 1 or 2 family dwelling or townhouse, you have to have at least 600 square foot of roof space if it's oriented between 110 and 270 of true north. Outside of that, it doesn't apply to you. But if you have 600 square foot of roof oriented between 110 and 270 of true north, then you have to save 300 square feet of that for solar ready. 150 for a townhouse. But so if you have at least 600 square foot, it could be on one roof or multiple. Saves 300 square foot of it on one roof or multiple for future solar. That just means I'm not going to put a bunch of plumbing vents and a bunch of stuff out of that location so that somebody can come put some solar on there later. You're identifying that on the plans. There's no physical requirement. You don't have to run the conduit. You have to identify on plans where conduit might be run, right, at a future time. The physical requirement is to save a place on the panel, right? Reserve the electrical panel space for a circuit breaker and sufficient capacity. And then there's a requirement in the energy code for a certificate that says what R values went into the home, what U factors went into the home, what equipment, what were your load or test. It also wants to know where that you have your solar ready zone on there. So that is a lot of the requirement for solar ready. So it's not an expensive thing, it's a plan thing. You just identify that you have it and you save time and space.
In case you couldn't tell, I'm not a contractor, but do you have to have a different kind of panel to be able to accept solar into it versus just a standard panel that transmits electricity through my house? Is it a different kind of panel that takes solar? Or is it just the same old panel?
You mean for the breaker to go on, no.
To
You
tie,
just have
to
to-
tie your solar panel into your panel, it's the same exact
It-
panel that I've always had.
It also depends on how old your house is and what kind of panel you have and all of that.
So does this apply to going back to the grid? So your solar panels, you got 300 square feet of solar, is that going to the grid or is it going to your house? Does it differentiate? Can you have on-site battery storage and that 300 square feet go to your battery? Or does that only apply to going back to the grid?
What's that? None of the above.
So
Well, so
if you have solar, those gotta go somewhere.
if you put in
Yes,
solar,
yes.
this is just a requirement to create the space for solar.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with actually putting solar
You
on.
never have to put solar on, you just have to save a space on the roof that's dedicated to it, because. At the time of new construction, I have an engineer that's designed my roof to all the different loads and he's whatever. If I do it after the fact and I come in for a house after the fact. Most jurisdictions require you to get an engineer to make sure that the roof can handle the load and, you know, then you have an electrical engineer, you know, all that. This is just saying. Your house is evaluated for it, you have clear space without a bunch of vents. If you wanna come pull a permit to install solar, you can put it on there, it has nothing to do with. I mean, it does ask you to. Locate where conduit might run back to the panel.
So there's no requirement as to where the energy goes. Okay.
No, and if and when you were to choose to
Yes.
install solar, it's totally up to you as to whether you make it grid tied, whether you have battery backup, whether you're not.
The code does not require that at all.
Yeah.
Unless there's a local amendment, but I haven't heard of any. Local amendments that would require you. I have some jurisdictions, right, like Trinidad. That has an intergovernmental agreement with the utility to not allow very much solar to be used. Right, and then in that case, they have very specific requirements, but most places don't have that kind of. Thing. So-
And we've had the solar ready appendix in the IRC adopted for since, 2022 now,
Yeah.
so.
And I think, and actually, I think the only difference between the IRC Solar Ready Appendix and this one is that the IRC requires you to make sure you add an extra 5 PSF to your load, and this one doesn't. To your load calculations, and this one doesn't, because they feel that roof designs are pretty substantial and have a pretty good fudge factor in them already,
Right.
that they didn't ask you to go get an extra 5 PSF. So yeah. There are exceptions, if you're somewhere and you get a lot of shade, or you're next to another building that's blocking you, or you're not gonna get, a lot of shade, then you have some exemptions for that. But if you do meet, there's some exceptions in there. If you do meet one of the exceptions, it still is going to ask you to save space on your panel. Even if you don't identify roof space, it's still gonna ask you to save space because future technology might require smaller space or might require, might not take as much space or whatever. They still want you to at least save some space on your panel, even if you don't save roof space. All right, multifamily. Basically, multifamily is following the commercial requirements. So same, if you have a building between 110 and 270, instead of being 600 square, if you have 600 square foot, say 300, it's saying save 40% of the roof area. That doesn't have a bunch of equipment and all of that. For that, and it gives you the same exception. What is this? Oh yeah, not less than 40% of the roof area. Not counting skylights and all of that kind of stuff. It can be one area, it can be subzoned, and then it gives you requirements for those subzones on the size. The idea is that you always have your clearances for fire, and you have all, you have ways to get in there and maintenance and do all of those things, so it does set up, if you're gonna do it on different roofs. To equal the requirement that you have minimum sizes of those zone areas. Yeah, so you can have it on the roof or the overhang or of the building or on another structure. This is where I have some people doing it on a carport or some people doing it on a whatever. So. And then. Free of obstructions, including vent. There are some low profile vents that you can get that can go under solar, but for the most part, it's saying, you know, don't have vents and skylights and stuff in that solar ready zone. Make sure your load is, the commercial does require the load, the residential didn't, and multifamily is meeting the commercial requirements, so. Construction documents, one, identify a potential pathway, and then make sure you've had the right size panel.
So going back to renovations, if you have to replace your roof, does that kick this off?
It's gonna be dependent on the definition of major renovation. All of these requirements are for new construction and major renovations, and it leaves the definition for major renovations up to the jurisdiction.
So Matt, do you have an answer to that yet?
No.
I have a question. How does this apply to if you're building a new home off grid?
Great question. We've had that question come up. I should remember what we asked the state, please give us, what did they tell us? I just remember. We said, do we have to do? I think it was a different answer for each one, right? Solar ready, you still have to do no matter what, I think. Right, and electric ready, well, if you're off grid, I can't remember what he said. Do you remember, Kim?
Essentially, what I recall, and I could look it up in notes to confirm before the end of this, is that everything is required, but you can add an amendment to your to your code so that if there is undue hardship or not realistic or something like that, that then the building department could approve a waiver for certain requirements. Not everything,
Not
but the certain ones that you're approving that don't make sense for your off-grid home. So that was essentially my understanding of what the state came back with.
Yeah. The state kind of has their hands tied, right, because of the legislation that said thou shalt create these requirements and didn't give them, they only gave them a couple outs. And we'll talk about those in just a minute. So outside of those, the state can't just say, oh, you don't have to do it. On most of it, so that whenever I ask the state for, can we get out of this in this jurisdiction? No, right, or sometimes they'll say yes, like for the utility, yes, show me an implementation plan, you can't get out of the requirement, but we can put it on. We did specifically ask about that, and yeah, you can't get out of things, but you can you can't get out of all the requirements, but you can get out of specific things that would be kind of ridiculous.
If I remember correctly, the solar ready, electric ready, EV ready, all of that was still supporting the transition toward electrification or the option for electrification, does not requiring electrification, but the one item that I think was the item that could be waived was the demand response requirements.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're not grid tied, then it doesn't make sense to have a demand response appliance type thing. So, but for everything else, it still fit the goals of the state.
So, because you're gonna run electricity. If you're off grid,
You're likely,
can have renewables,
Yep.
and so, there wasn't a lot that you could get out of.
I'll look at my notes though, just to confirm.
And then lastly, we just have EV ready. So EV ready for residential is for every 1 and 2 family home or townhome. If you have a dedicated parking space, you have to have at least 1 EV ready space. So I might have a 3-car garage. It doesn't require 1 for each, right? I need 1 EV ready space for any home that has a dedicated parking space. Okay, so that could be a garage, it could be a driveway. I've seen jurisdictions say, okay, we only have on-street parking, but your house address is right there and nobody else can park there, that's dedicated, that's now your dedicated parking space. You know, so I've seen people enforce it that way. So if you have a dedicated, it has to be EV ready. Doesn't have to have the actual charger in there. The EV ready is just saying I've got the capacity, I've got the panel space, I've got it all, I've got the conduit run, I've got everything up and an outlet there. I just don't have a charger plugged into it. It's ready for it. And so you have to have one EV ready space. Right? With a receptacle within 3 feet of that dedicated space or between 2 parking spaces if you have multiple. Minimum 8.3 kVA electric panel labeled for future EV ready. Right, so there's the EV ready definition. When it comes to multifamily, it's based on the size of the parking space, this, or the parking lot. So if I have 10 or less parking spaces, I don't have to have any actual installed chargers. I just have to have EV ready, capable and light. But if I'm an R2, it is based on R2, over 10 spaces, then I have to have a certain percentage of them and actually have chargers and the rest are capable or ready. And this is where it shows you if I use a DC fast charger, I can substitute for up to 5 of those spaces, or if I use, if I put in more of these, I can get out of less of these. Putting in more of these does not get me out of, but other ones. But so it does have some wiggle room in there. These are the numbers that other House bill is holding you to at the state level, to these numbers. So that's multifamily. I didn't put commercial in here. I don't know why. Commercial is also based on the size of the parking lot and how much you have to have. So this is that House Bill 23-1233 that says, hey, no matter what you're doing, you have to provide EV ready, EV equipment for multifamily R2 buildings. So just make sure you know that that's a requirement. There are some waivers. I'm going to talk to you about those waivers real fast. I think this is it. There is a waiver in there that the jurisdiction has the opportunity to adopt. They don't have to. This came from things like the Marshall Fire. In fact, when the Marshall Fire hit over there in Louisville and on the Front Range, I was in the city council meeting talking about getting them to their newer code, right? We were just enforcing a new code and then the fires hit. And so then there was this panic that people were having to replace their home because a fire got there and they didn't have enough insurance and you can't build it. You couldn't build it today for what you could build it way back then. So there was this, and now you're gonna make me build it to a newer code. It's gonna have even more. And so, they came up with a rule in Louisville at the time, if you're you're building a new house because the fire hit it, you do not have to meet the new requirements. If you're building a new house that wasn't impacted, then you have to meet. And that's what this code is allowing you to do. If a natural disaster comes in and wipes out your building, the jurisdiction has the opportunity to adopt a natural disaster waiver that allows you to not meet these requirements.
Is that on a case by house by house basis or like at scale, like Louisville? Does that make sense? It's like if one house burns down.
To you,
Okay,
right? They didn't write it. They're allowing you to write it.
got it.
But you don't have to.
Got it.
They being the state.
There is also a substantial cost differential waiver that's in there for the electric ready, solar ready, EV ready requirements, but it only applies to commercial buildings over 10,000 square feet. And multifamily buildings over 10,000 square feet that will say, if the cost of doing this code, the electric ready, solar ready, and EV ready, not the whole code. If the cost of that comes to more than 1% of your total mechanical, electric, and plumbing, then you don't have to do anything over that 1%. However, because because there is that other House bill that requires you to do the EV charging no matter what, you can't get out of EV charging for multi-family building, but you can use the cost of it in your calculation, right? So it's, again, it's optional, you can adopt or you can amend out this waiver if you want to. Some people are like, I'm not gonna sit and look at every building that comes in that's a commercial building over 10,000 square feet. Or some people say, we will never have a commercial building over 10,000 square feet in our county, so we don't need this. It only applies to those, some people will amend it out because they don't wanna look at it, some people like it in there. The code, the state says you can keep it or not, if you amend it out, it just means everybody has to meet the requirements, so that's more restrictive. So they don't care if you take it out. And then it gives you a definition of what is substantial cost differential. Letting you know that the cost of all the electric ready solar ready EV compared to the cost of your already mechanical electric and plumbing. What's the difference in cost? And it might level out of some of the requirements. Probably not gonna affect you here. I don't know that you have a bunch of commercial buildings over 10,000 square feet.
We had a couple in the last 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, maybe, so you might keep it. I don't have to, it's up to you. All right, so just a couple things, sometimes we fight moving forward, for new construction. Sometimes, some people fight moving forward to new codes for new construction. Everybody always fights moving forward on anything that has to do with renovations. Renovations were at one point a new building, so maybe if we can catch those new buildings, we don't have to fight so hard about the existing buildings down the road, right? And so, something about, taking smaller steps is easier than bigger leaps. What do I mean by that? That means like you're on the 18. Hopefully you'll agree to go to the 2024 codes, because if you don't, this code is not going backward, right? In the intent of the code, it says they can't roll it back. And so, the longer we wait, the bigger the steps we're taking. And what I always hear in jurisdictions, but I have jurisdictions that I helped just this year go from the 06 and the 09 code to the 24. Like, such a big jump. Yep, if we would have taken those little steps as we went, it wouldn't be a big jump, right? All the time we say, we don't want to take this step, it's gonna be too much. And then when we get to the next step, it's an even bigger step. Well, we really can't take this because it's too much. So at what point do you take the little steps instead of the big, huge, giant leaps? That's just, something to think about. And then my conclusion is just, don't get overwhelmed on it. Remember that for the most part, almost everything that went into this low energy and carbon code was to fix some things that were wrong and to make it Colorado specific. A lot of the things that we're fretting over is either already a state mandate because it's the electric ready, solar ready, EV ready. We have no choice in that. Or it's already in the energy code. So but we do have the choice of going to a more simplified version of the energy code.
Lecture has a stand phrase.
Okay. I'm almost done, answer. Just because something's newer doesn't mean it's more restrictive or even more expensive. I can tell you the 2024 IECC is cheaper to build to than the 2021 for residential buildings in multi-climate zones. And so just people think, I'm still gonna go to the 21 because it's, the 24 has gotta be harder or newer or more expensive, and it's not always true. So don't keep that mindset. The code may be mandated legislatively, but it wasn't written there. The code is heavily influenced by the National Association of Home Builders who demand more flexibility. Please remember, we all have the ability to be in this code. It wasn't written by the people who told us we had to write it. If you're going to compare something, compare to what you are already doing, not to the base code. Chances are you're already doing something. You're doing it or more already, so just compare to build off of that, not from ground zero as we talked about. And keep a mindset that this focuses on the fact that this is all done to provide flexibility and options and not to add restrictions and requirements. Mindset is going to be huge in understanding this code. And we can't continue to hold our other codes hostage because we don't want a new energy code. There are too many advances in life safety to let energy codes hold us back. Question?
Fletcher had his hand raised on Zoom. Fletcher, what's your,
Yeah. Hey, Matt, can you guys hear me okay?
yep,
I can't turn on my camera. It's disallowed for some reason. But I am just gonna ask a couple quick ones in case I'm sorry I maybe missed a section on mechanical when I took a phone call. But curious if this has any effect on burning wood? Any impact on installing wood stoves?
The wood stoves is only at your local level. If you're, you might have to have an EPA or a state approved, stove, but this code doesn't cover any of that. No, that's all at a local level.
and
Okay,
for
that's
us,
cool.
for us, Fletcher, we would just continue we have a boundary around here that is a no burn, no solid fuel zone. We
Right.
would continue that, and outside of that boundary, we would have no further restrictions.
Interesting. Yeah, it's in my experience, it's a pretty good approach to electrify a house with a heat pump and a wood stove as the backup for those very cold nights. And then on resistive heat, curious, I may have missed this section, I apologized, but I've seen a lot of situations lately where smaller projects looking at small amounts of, looking at electrifying by using small electric boilers, for instance, for an in-floor zone, or the under slab mats that go under bathroom tiles, for instance, where it doesn't make sense to install a mini split head in a bathroom. Curious to just have you speak to resistance heat limits as they apply to things like baseboard under mat, electric resistance mat under tile, and then boilers if they're somehow a separate category.
It is in the IDCC and it'll say that pretty much electric resistance is, at first it removes it, right? Like electric resistance not allowed. And then it'll say except, and then it'll allow you maybe to do some electric resistance as your supplementary heat, not backup. Backup heat requires, a whole load. Supplementary heat, where you're like just that part where the heat pump can't cover it, right? Or those things that you're talking about. So it does allow for supplementary heat to be electric resistance in certain instances, and then it puts some requirements on the controlling of it. But
Okay.
doesn't say that you absolutely can't use electric resistance. There are some amendments that bring electric resistance out, but I don't think that that's for here.
Okay, got it. I appreciate the distinction
I think
between
it's just,
supplemental and
it's
backup.
just very, very limited.
Right.
At first it says, thou shalt not use electric resistance, but it brings in some exception.
Is that because of the demand?
It's very inefficient, yeah.
It's actually 100% efficient.
Well, I'm very, very huge,
Ineffective?
ineffective, yeah.
Yeah, it's expensive to operate.
Very expensive to operate.
So, I mean, if you have a quick minute for like a specific example, small house in San Miguel County that I'm looking at, an air to water heat pump makes a lot of sense for this house, except that it's so small and limited by site constraints that there's almost nowhere to put an outdoor unit. And then there's the fact that the owner of the house is old enough that they're unlikely to see the ROI on a heat pump system, but they do have in-floor slab heat. And so it seems that a smaller or like a smaller physical system that would be just a electric resistance boiler is what the team may be drifting toward for those reasons. And I'm just curious if that's somehow prohibited in this new code.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you would 100% get away with being electric resistance for your main heat source, right? It's really only allowed as supplementary heat.
Right.
So here's what I would say. like even in Aspen, we're like, oh, no supplementary, no electric resistant heat, and then they're like, if you build a passive house and you build a really, you have a small house and it's really built really, really well, then it's not as big of an issue. It's all in how you build your house, right? And
Correct.
so the idea there is that, maybe build an igloo and then, and then you can throw you won't need much heat, right? And so, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword there with really good insulation and passive house quality, only needing a small amount of heat and then being required to install a $40,000 system whenever it may be.
Well, and one thing you have to keep in mind, and this I'm running into too, and you have to think about this up front when you're building those houses too, is what I'm finding, and this is not a code issue, this is just a ventilation probably issue, that sometimes when you build a really, really amazing envelope and you put in a really great mechanical system, that's amazing in the winter. But what I'm finding in some places in the summer, you're actually having to air condition where you wouldn't before. Because the house is still holding the heat in. Right, and so you have to think about that in your upfront design, that's not, the code's not gonna cover that. I talked to Joe Stieberg the other day and he's like, oh my gosh. You're still so much benefit in this kind of a climate for an amazing envelope because you're gonna heat more than you're gonna cool. Take the energy penalty of cooling or do some passive design to handle that, but that is the only thing that I see. We have very much reduced loads 3/4 of the year, but there might be a month or so that you're gonna cool that you never get before. So it's something to think about. All right. Well, I really hope you guys are not too freaked out about the low energy code. It isn't. It's not bad. I hope that you guys will think about moving forward. Now, like I say, the longer you wait, the more there's gonna be. Probably, it's not gonna go backward. So.
I've got a question for Kim. You were talking about the HERS amendment to go down to 3,600 square feet like it is now. What are the ratings?
Say what
ratings do those houses have to obtain? Is that gonna change also?
It would align with the state's requirement for large home. So the only thing we do is change the number from 5,000 square feet to 3,600 or 3,500, whichever the county wanted to go with, if they chose that. All of the requirements for large home would then apply to anything in that size category. So we wouldn't be changing the requirements for ERI or anything like that within that category.
Yeah, you said it was 42, or was that in the IECs? Yeah.
42 without renewables and 0 with renewables, that's for houses over 45 or over 7,500 square foot in the book.
And that would drop down to 3,600 in this scenario?
No, not the 7,500 square feet, but the 5,000 would drop down to 3,600, 3,500. So it'd be
That's-
anything between, she's used 3,500, anything between 3,500 and 7,500 wouldn't have to meet the requirements in the code for large home.
That was 7 to 10% more efficient.
Right.
I don't think we threw out ours.
Yes.
Yeah, we did, because between, right now, the way that you guys have them in was 3,500, anything below 3,500, you can go any path you want and just meet the minimum code. Between 35 and 75, you can still go any path you want, so you don't have to get a HERS score. You can go any path you want, but you have to do some extra stuff, 7 to 10 to make it more efficient because you have a bigger footprint. Anything over 75, that's what still has to go net zero, even here. The changes between 35, the code says between 5,000 and 7,500. You guys are between 3,600. Still have all your options of path compliance. I know, I have a real quick and see what that score would be at 3,600.
I was trying to find it in my documents.
That would change how it is now, because right now, anything over 3,600 has to follow the ERI compliance that, but you don't have other options. So this would change that, so you do have other options. And I understand that. Yeah.
This would say that when, right now it says. Give you different tables based on how it says. Yeah, so right now. If you're less than 5,000 or less than 3,500, you in climate zone 6, you have to get a score of 51. If you use the ERI path, but you don't have to use the ERI path, you could use a different path, right? If you're between 3,500 and 75, you need a score of 48. If you're over 75, you need a score, I'm pretty sure it's 42. Oh, you have to go to 42 and then 0 with the.
So Kim, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think currently we can use the solar with the HERS,
Mhm.
right? Can I use that same solar for the rent going forward?
For rent.
No, you can't use same solar for two
I
things.
can't use,
It can be one or the other.
Yeah,
but can I take part of it?
Hmm.
Okay.
and now with this code, the way they have the table set up, even if you went prescriptive or with res checker or something, you could get credit for the renewables. Right, and then if you go to run. Have a minute.
And then one other question going forward, so. I've been talking to San Miguel Power and my solar guy, we're talking about the batteries in the homes. And. Currently, if there's a large demand on the grid, there's a generator that fires up somewhere. And on gas and runs, that's the load coming into the system, because they don't have the coal. So. There's other jurisdictions around or other utilities who allow the batteries and they can tie in your house, you subscribe. And they can pull off your batteries for their peak mix. Whatever percentage you want to give them. So San Miguel Power and Tri-State are heading that way. They don't know what batteries they're going to use yet, but. Are there credits from that going back to any of this? So let's say I put the batteries in my house.
Yeah.
New, and I'm gonna subscribe to that system.
Mhm.
Are there credits in here?
Shauna, are there credits in the section 408 for battery use? I don't think
I
so.
don't think so, no.
No.
I think that is something that's so tied to each individual utility. That it would be hard to write the base code requirement around it.
It also goes, I fully am in support of that and working toward that in multiple different angles. It goes beyond addressing the home's energy use and into the larger picture of the grid a bit. And so I think as far as an energy code, like where's the
Yeah.
line as to what the code can have it cover in its scope? Yeah, so that's where the incentives from the utility company come into play for rebates and the credit, or the payment that you get from Tri-State if you opt into that program, et cetera. Does that answer your question?
Requirements like in the. Building codes and all of that and fire codes about. If you use the battery, either you use some energy storage here, but you have to, but it's not. In the energy code about, you have to use that for credit.
I am gonna have to excuse myself. I have a bit of a thing to deal with, but Lily is gonna take my spot as the ex officio member here. And we'll follow up. So I gotta run, but I'm sorry, guys, but I will talk soon. No, I'll talk to you.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, any other questions? We didn't, you know.
So you're more knowledgeable of this than all of us, I think.
So.
Talk about the heat pumps.
Mhm.
lot of dual systems here, right?
Sure.
And sometimes I put that electric grid in the line for the third stage of heat, basically, right? So you got a boiler, heat pump gets cold, it can't keep up. The second stage, now we got to put electric coil. When those heat pumps are coming on and it's all about BTUs per dollar. And once, they're efficient, but once we get down to a certain temperature, the gas is gonna be cheaper. Typically,
Gotcha. Okay.
so. What about, we're on time of use metering here? How does that affect the cost when the temperatures are down and heat pumps aren't as efficient?
Well, I think the very first thing is, are you buying the right heat pump? Right? Because I think that's what I find the most around the entire state, the people freaking out about the heat pumps is they're not buying the cold climate heat pumps. Right, so their heat pumps, all heat pumps are certified at 47 degrees. Can meet 100% capacity at 47 degrees. You have to get a cold climate heat pump that,
If you're comfortable.
yeah, you have to get a cold climate heat pump that
Outside temperature
says
47.
it can meet its capacity down at 15 degrees or below. They have them that go down to 30 below. Right, so it's a matter of picking the right heat pump first of all, so that you don't need as that much supplementary heat. Right, because the heat pump can actually do it. It's the folks usually that I find that are buying the wrong heat pump. Right, it's like I tell people, you live in Telluride where you get a ton of snow. Right, and so do you buy a 2-wheel drive car to drive around? Well, you can. There might be times out of the year where you're gonna have to put chains on that, or you're gonna have to do, you're gonna have to add to it to make it work for your climate. It's the same with a heat pump. You buy a 2-wheel drive heat pump, you're gonna have to add a lot of supplementary heat, and then you're gonna have to figure out when is it gonna be cost effective and when isn't it. So the very first thing is making sure you get the right heat pump. I think the amendments that you guys created have that, they call that out, right? And that's what I've been doing when I write amendments. You have to get a heat pump that will serve at least 75 or 90% of the capacity down at 15 degrees. Not at 47, right? And so that's, I think, the biggest part is getting the right heat pump. And then after that,
Yeah.
What kind of supplementary heat are you gonna install? That's why I like that comment about the wood stove, that was cool. Let's take back up for a big great supplement. But yeah, so that's a little bit trickier on what is that supplementary heat source. It could it be your electric resistance? Could it be, what could it be?
We did create an amendment though in the regional amendment package to require cold climate heat pumps for these climate zones. Because the states for climate zone 4 across 7, we've got 6 and 7 in this zone. And so the ones that work in climate zones 4 and 5, those heat pumps are not going to work up here. So that amendment I think is really important to ensure that they're successfully operating. And that then during those super cold times, a homeowner's utility bill isn't skyrocketing
Right.
a high percentage of the winter. It's only a couple days where they
Right.
might have extra electricity use or something.
And yeah, you're just designing to 99% of the time, not the 1% that it might actually.
Yeah.
Does anybody design around time of use metering?
You can't.
Where you might be better off with gas financially than heat pump from 5 to 9 p.m.
Fletcher might be good at answering that one since he's in the heat pump industry, but it's certainly part of the calculations that somebody could include in their analysis. I do know of one electrician who installs dual fuel heat pumps over in Silverton. That may take that into account.
Yep.
You can also put heat pumps or any other type of electric device on a timer so that it doesn't operate as much or at all during that peak time. And that's one of the suggestions, especially for heat pumps, is, heat up your house more during the day, let the heat pump not operate until 9 o'clock at night, or if it drops below a certain temperature, obviously have it come on, but you know, set the controls appropriately for that. Yes.
The temperature doesn't fluctuate.
Yep. It all comes down to billing.
This energy code could probably like be reduced 100% if you could just build a really, really good envelope where you're tight, you're not bringing in a ton of outside air at that temperature that it is, and you've got great insulation, and you know, you're more durable. You don't have moisture getting into your buildings, and you know, to me, when I'm writing somebody's code from scratch, the focus is on the thermal envelope, because that's gonna reduce all the loads. You're gonna have a more durable building that's gonna last over time. People can shelter in place if something happens and the grid goes down or something happens. But you can shelter in place because you're going to stay the same temperature, right? And to build a good envelope, you won't need as much heating and cooling. You can get a cold climate heat pump that's gonna get you 99% of the time.
Did I hear correctly in your slides that from 2021 to 2024, we've reverted back to 2018 insulation requirements?
In a couple places, so what happened was when the 2021 was written, it required R60 insulation in the attics. For some climate zones, and it was always R49. And so it went up to R60 in the 2021. The home builders got involved and got that, could show, you know, the impact versus the return on investment. They could show that the R49 did fine, and so it did revert back to R49. So the window U factors went back a little bit, not a lot. There's a footnote in there. I think people don't pay attention to the footnote. So there's a footnote that if you're over 4,000 feet in elevation, you can have a worse window.
Which is another amendment that we're creating to remove that.
So a lot of people are taking out because, you know, in Aspen, we've had 0.25 windows required or 0.26 forever, and they need them all day long. And to say that we shouldn't have to, because the idea was when I was sitting in the code hearings and they were arguing about that, was that once you go over 4,000 feet in elevation, you rely on that argon gas to get your good U factor, and that argon gas dissipates once you get over elevation. And so you might have a window that's marked at a 0.30 U factor, but it truly isn't because the gas is dissipated. But they're building much better windows now, and so just feel like that argument goes away.
Yeah, because I don't think we allow argon window
Yeah.
there for that reason.
The way we wrote it in Aspen, well, you have to get to your 0.26 without reline. Yeah. You would be triple pane or extra low, extra.
Just double pane, just good quality double pane.
So there's ways to meet it.
So for us going from 2018 to 2024, we might not feel quite as much pain then, because those things are.
One was definitely more expensive and harder to do. For the envelope. Where you're gonna notice the difference in climate zone 6. Which you probably won't, it's to start from where you're at. I don't know what kind of blower door test results you normally get on average. I can tell you, I do a lot of residential field studies, and across the entire state of Colorado. Colorado is first in the whole United States for their average blower door test. And so our average is 2.6 for the whole state. And so what the code requirement is 3 air changes per hour at 50 pascals, but it moved to 2.5 for climate zone 6. So you'll have a tighter blower door that as far as the envelope, that's where you're going to see the biggest change in your envelope. But to me, it's not that much of a change because you're probably already there.
Yeah, and as you said, the other change in cost was ventilation requirements and
Yeah.
requiring an ERV. And for the most part, for most homes, everybody's doing an ERV anyway, so.
once you get into these mountain communities, just about everybody's doing ERVs and good insulation, not because the code says to, but because the customers aren't gonna be happy if you don't. There's gonna be a lot of complaints. So most people are doing it already. It's actually easier to me to get people on an energy code in mountain communities than it is on the plains, right? Because if they're not doing something good, you notice it. You have more extreme weather. What else? Do you have another question?
I guess I have a question for you. What happens next? So we haven't adopted this yet, but we plan to attempt to adopt it. But there were a lot of questions today that Matt either couldn't or didn't want to answer yet, so.
My understanding is we're planning on going, I think the process is going to the planning commission first, presenting the amendments of the code that we're planning on adopting, and then going to the board of county commissioners. That's happening in October.
Okay.
And then like Matt
Has to
said,
be adopted before the end of September.
oh, so sorry, September.
Why?
In order to take advantage of grant funding, otherwise the county is not reimbursed for any of the other.
Okay, President. Sorry.
Yeah.
Has to be adopted by the BOCC.
Is
By
it
the end
September
of
30th?
September, our deadline for the grant, we just extended from the end of June to the end of September.
Okay, so
we have
end of September, we will. Before the end of September, we'll come to the planning commission and then the BOCC for adoption, and then. While it will be adopted, it won't be implemented until 2020, the following fall of 2027. We'll give contractors and the building community and designers an entire year before. Before they submit their permit applications for it to be implemented, because as we know, projects can be in the design phase for years. Before they go for permit applications, we don't want to have things that happen in the design phase, this comes into effect, and then they have to change everything because we only gave them a 2-month or even a 6-month window.
Yeah, so we'll target the August Planning Commission meeting. But we can be if necessary, we can go September for Planning Commission and still make the September 30th deadline. But right now we'll target August.
You have
So
one
Matt
reading
knows that,
in your
Tamara?
county.
What?
Does
We're
Matt
counties.
know that?
One reading.
Yes, I just misspoke. Wow.
And then there's another board here. Maybe I didn't understand who
This
else
is
here.
the board of review, they're the building departments.
Advisory.
Advisory board, and also if someone wants to contest a code that or change something that doesn't like the ruling from our adopted codes, they can go in front of this. Their appeal board, I guess, or appeal body, and they can make that decision. That we can't as the county staff.
Are you guys at all involved in drafting the amendments and what is proposed to be adopted?
You've advised us on things.
Okay.
Yeah. They don't
Because-
vote on it, but they advise us on it.
Great, thank you.
What's the grant fund?
So Eco Action Partners received a grant from the Colorado Energy Office 2 years ago at this point, I believe we started, to help the region, all the regional governments understand and adopt and implement the low energy and carbon code. So that's the grant that we're working under to support the county and other jurisdictions to develop the regional amendment package.
Is that paying for her to be here today?
Paying for Shauna to be here today, paying for all of the workshops.
Village, town are not.
They have opted not to continue moving forward as part of the regional code cohort. So only a few, they didn't adopt prior to our June 30th deadline. They are not moving forward on that track. San Miguel County, Ouray County, Ophir are planning to adopt before the end of September, and Ridgeway already adopted in May. So the other jurisdictions have opted, they were part of the code cohort, part of all the efforts, and then have opted not to move forward for various different reasons at this time.
They'll have to eventually.
And they'll have to do so without the financial support from the state.
Yeah, what? energy code cycles are there? I know Mountain Village, they're on the 21,
Mountain
correct?
Village is on 21,
And then
town just adopted the 24 last.
just the standard code, those.
The
They did,
2024
yeah.
ISCC, yeah. So both of them are also on the electric ready.
Yeah.
And
So
when they
your
move
advice then to the
forward,
town
they'll
would be
under the
adopt the
requirements
LECC.
for them.
I don't make that recommendation lightly, right? I'm a code official first and foremost, and so I'll always be code official, building inspector, planning, doing those, but I travel to all the jurisdictions, and there are some jurisdictions, where I might say, maybe we better try something different, right? I will recommend everybody to build low energy carbon for commercial, I've not recommended it very much. I mean, there's a couple who have decided to stay on the 21. But not go to 24. But for residential, there's a couple places where, you know, maybe they don't want to go to the low energy code, but for the most part, I feel like that board just really works hard to fix this code.
You know, from our perspective as builders, it's difficult.
Yeah.
You have 3 jurisdictions right now
Yeah.
that are all doing different things.
Yep.
And we have to keep doing these projects and not stumble along the way because everybody's different. It is.
I think the more that you can voice your frustration as a builder with the inconsistency of each jurisdiction being on a different code, the jurisdictions might listen and become consistent. And working toward that, at one point, we're all consistent, and then we got all off again. That was assigned to me in 2008 when I first joined EcoAct. Make all these jurisdictions go in the same code, and so I've been working toward it ever since. And we kind of got closer, and then we got further away.
Yeah.
And then so but they need to hear the voices of the community, the voices of EcoAction. When I'm not a builder out there, it doesn't matter as much.
Well, builders, most of the architects, I would think would care, the owners would care.
You would, yeah, but those voices have to be heard at the council meetings to be heard.
Yeah, I think that's it usually. They voice their concern after it's already gone through the process and here's what we're stuck with and hey, now everybody's on something different instead of voicing the concern up front. Where we have a chance to maybe do something different, like usually.
Yeah, and I know it's not necessarily a preference of building department staff to be different than the other jurisdictions. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, depends. But sometimes it's also council driven of just not really hearing how important it is to their community.
I mean, like for Aspen, Glenwood, Snowmat, like that whole Roaring Fork Valley, I've been working forever to get them all on the same code. We finally last year said, well, I'll get on the same edition. Right, and then we might have different amendments, but each jurisdiction has amendments based on their goals, their abilities, their staffing levels and all of that, so it's really hard to make amendment package that fits everybody, and it does take a lot of work, so like, I think there's 3 or 4 cohorts that really have worked hard to make regional amendment packages, that's so much work. But it is much better, and I think that's one of the reasons that the state took on this. We'll just make the low energy carbon code in 2024. Then we could have one code that everybody could adopt. It could be an energy code and everybody could adopt one code. Every once in a while, I think the whole state, some legislation will come by and require one code for all the codes, right? A state mandate building code and the energy code and all the other, so far. Hasn't happened.
That doesn't really seem like a one size fits all kind
Right.
of state, it's so much diverse.
So much diversity. Should we have 4 or 5 of them? Like, it's really hard to write one thing that fits everybody.
Would be nice to get Terra and Mountain Village, you know.
Yeah. All right, well, if that's all, I'm gonna try to go move my car before my 3-hour time limit.
Need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah.
I'll motion.
Also, all in favor?
Thanks to everybody online.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.